Welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. I'm really excited about the oil we're diving into this week. I know it's in Liz's inner circle, not one in mine, so I'm fascinated to find out what I've been pondering and whether it resonates with Liz's expansive experience with this oil. Today we're exploring galbanum, Liz.
We are, and it's so I wouldn't say it was one of my ones in my inner circle. I do use it a lot, but it's not. But it is in my family's circle. So my mum was a big advocate. My sister goes nowhere without it. She has it in a handbag all of the time. So it gets used a lot in our house. And I have to say, so where we have these situations where Britain says things differently to the rest of the world. So as a black country wench, I should say that I always say Galbanum.
Galbanum,
but it's very sounds Wolverhampton when I say it, so apologies for that. But yeah, Galbanum. But yeah, a lovely oil in my opinion.
Yeah. Now it's a bit of an interesting oil from the plant that it actually comes from. I believe it's a member of the carrot family. It's native to Iraq and Iran. And it is a resin oil, but normally when we think of resin oils, we think of these big, expansive trees and the resin coming either oozing out from the trunk or something like that. A little bit different with this one, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's probably its closest cousin is asafoetida, but it looks, I guess, a bit like a giant fennel or an angelica. So the ferula family, as you say, yes, native to sort of the Middle East, and there's around about 180 different members of this family, but particularly the asafoetida and the galbanum plant are the really important ones medicinally.
And the resin is found in because it's kind of a little stalk and there's a big flowering of yellow flowers at the top, isn't it? And the resin is kind of found in that little stalk.
Yes. So what they do is they cut it really close to the roots, because then it oozes lots and lots of the resin. And of course, we recognize what the resin's for. It's to protect the plant, to say, oh, something's happened, healed. But what's interesting is the sort of different hardnesses of galbanum. When we're talking about that, I'm talking about what you use as incense, that kind of, the hard resin and the soft resin. They distill the soft resin. And what happens is so many insects get stuck in it because it's all gummy. Then they have to soften it again to get rid of all the and then they distill that.
Yeah, fascinating. And probably the way that I would describe it to most people who haven't seen the plant before, it's kind of like when we break open dandelions and they've got that milky kind of
yes, I would say that's probably true. Yeah.
For people that are trying to get a visual of it, that's the kind of idea I think of when I think of galbanum.
Yeah, and it's green. And what's interesting is in perfumery there are very few green fragrances, which I always think is very odd considering that how many green plants there are in the world. But it's considered to be a truly green fragrance. But if you I've got one on my scented stick. It takes quite a long time for the green to come through. It's almost like tar, to begin with, and you would think if you smelt it that it was really thick and unctuous and dark because it smells smoky. But it's absolutely clear, and it's quite thin when it comes out of the bottle. It's when you look at it chemically, almost half of its constituents are alpha-pinene, but it takes quite a long time for those, even though they're monoterpenes, to come to the top, and then suddenly you go, oh, I can almost smell pine in there, but it takes a long time. Yeah, the sesquiterpenes are thick in it.
Yeah, I must admit, when it comes to fragrance, it's a really unusual one. It's not something you can kind of compare to others. Probably if I had to lead people down the path if they haven't smelt it before, we know that vetiver smells like the earth. Well, this kind of smells like the earth with those green shoots coming out of it. And it does, I know it does have a bit of a link to the spring equinox, which we can talk about later. But yeah, it's kind of that green earthiness, doesn't it?
Yeah, yes, yeah. So that kind of, it's... I think the Romans associated it with the goddess Flora, didn't they? And it is very much like that first bit where the world the earth is in barren winter, and then you get those first shoots. So you've still got the wetness of winter in there, but it is quite smoky.
Yeah. Now I'm intrigued with this. Was it your sister or your sister-in-law you said was won't go somewhere without galbanum?
My sister Tasha.
Yeah. Why? What does she use it for?
So she is a really avid camper. So I always get pictures of her sitting out in these tents surrounded by the rain, and I think, oh, you are bonkers. But so like when you're camping, it's easy to stand on like a thorn or to get scratched in your fingers. And she's got an allotment. She's an avid gardener, so she's always kind of getting ripped and stuff. And I think that if you were to think of a like theme word for it, I would say festering, and so if anything that's kind of starting to fester or to go ulcerated or to go septic or bad, then that's what I would use galbanum for. She uses it like thorn straight away so that it doesn't. And also she tells a story often. A friend of hers got a black thorn into a hand, very, very deeply, and it wouldn't come out. Wherever they did, it wouldn't come out. Yet the galbanum seemed to pull it out. So that was really interesting. But she uses it all the time. But I have to say, it's not pretty smelling. You're going to need to blend it with other things. But in terms of things looking a bit, it's a great oil.
Yeah. Is for me, pretty much doTERRA offers it as a limited time oil, and I don't have too much information or experience with it. I will occasionally, if I'm sleeping at home by myself, will pop a drop in with my moisturizer at night because it is a resin for that skincare kind of thing. But apart from that, I'm intrigued with the splinters or thorns and that type of thing. But where else would you maybe reach for galbanum?
So in terms of skincare, I know that Marguerite Maury, who was like one of the pioneers of aromatherapy, she always used galbanum with violet for skincare, which is an absolutely enchanting and just like it's almost like deep violet chocolate fragrance. And she used it on the skin, but she always warns, don't use it on young skins. It's very much for more mature skins. In Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, they talk about how it moves qi through the body, and particularly Chinese medicine talks about how it moves blood qi. So anything that feels kind of stagnant, then you have this movement. So on the most basic level, we would say constipation, chest congestion, phlegm, catarrh, circulation problems such as hemorrhoids or what they're called in your legs, varicose veins, any kind of poor circulation, so Raynaud's disease or just cold feet, and also like rheumatism, arthritis, that kind of thing. It has a really long history in Iranian medicine, and actually they take the resin orally. I will tell you, it tastes absolutely disgusting, but if you put like some in honey and you put that into warm water and drink that for 3 days, they say that will get rid of hemorrhoids, but also any kind of sort of stomach problems where there is digestive stagnation, like flatulence, indigestion, all of that kind of thing. And I feel like it was something else. Yeah. So I often talk about how I have a favourite constituent, and that's beta caryophyllene, but it's got a contender now. Alpha-pinene is on my radar as like the superpower of the time at the moment. And the reason for that is because of the research into something called chondrocytes. So chondrocytes are the cells that make up cartilage. So you find a richness of chondrocytes in the discs of the spine and in the tissue that lines the joints. And they found that alpha-pinene actually helps chondrocytes to regenerate. So if somebody has like osteoporosis, this is the key area that they're looking to investigate. Alpha-pinene can be extremely good for helping to regenerate the cartilage that's lost in the spine. But also think about if somebody has had like a hip replacement, how clever it will be if they can implant like chondrocytes into the surgical place. So if you think about how it's been used, and that we should say it's like an ingredient that's been used for, we know, 3,500 years because it's in the Exodus. Use that on a wound that's had like a surgical area. We say it heals the skin, but the alpha-pinene also helps to regenerate the actual joint itself. So it's really important from that point of view.
Yeah, wow.
So it's I honestly think it is one of the most important oils that we've got, and yet nobody ever talks about it. And we'll go on to spiritual aspects in a minute, and that also has really important ways of using it.
When you're talking about the alpha-pinene in the galbanum, is it that it has a high amount of alpha-pinene, or
almost half of it? Almost half of it is alpha-pinene.
Okay,
so about 45% usually.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so yeah, so probably topical use would be a popular way of using this when you do have either those kind of wounds that need healing, or
or any kind of pain, because I mean alpha-pinene also, they know now, is like nociceptive. It's got a weak action on the mu receptor, which is what opioids work on. So again, you've got that pain killing action as well. So any kind of, I mean, as I say, rheumatism, arthritis, aches and pains, particularly like in massage, because it's just like, oh, you go like that, it's so relaxing. Fantastic. And like I say, you know, also if you've got like an old person who, skin tears are so problematic for old people who are bedridden, and you know, bed sores and stuff like that. Imagine using this beautiful oil that's so sedative, so calming. As I say, I haven't said actually thinking about it, associated with Osiris, so associated with death in Egypt. You know, that transition to the other side, it's so peaceful, and you are protecting their skin too. Really, I can't rate it enough.
Yeah, when you were talking about, you know, massaging it in, what would you tend to, you know, its aroma is a little bit, let's say, unique. What would you probably mix it with for massage blend?
Depends what it was for, but if it was something like, if somebody was bedridden, I think it'd be like lavender and chamomile. It blends absolutely beautifully with your floral oils like rose and geranium. It's, even though it's got like a quite flat scent to it, it's a rich scent. And if you've got sort of flowery, like upbeat fragrances like citruses and things like that, goes absolutely beautiful with it.
Yeah, from just a kind of a totally aromatic kind of sense, I think it's really nice with the flowers and the fruits, especially for that kind of uplifting springtime feel. You've got, you know, that is the earth from which all the flowers and the fruit are growing. So it can be a really nice springtime kind of energy and blend in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I'm excited because, you know, you mentioned Osiris and the underworld. And I was actually kind of going on my own little journey that kind of came through since I've been leaning in more to Galbanum over the last week. So tell me a little bit more about the spiritual aspect of Osiris. I'm intrigued it looks like we've gone down the same garden path from different angles.
So it is like a traditional use in Egypt. Obviously, it wouldn't be the essential oil. It would be the resin that had been macerated into a warm oil of some description. But traditionally, it was put onto Osiris's head at the time of the funeral. as a means of giving an offering to Osiris to say, please intercede after death for us. And what I find is absolutely fascinating, and this is kind of like a cross section to the research that I'm doing into myrrh. So if you read enough about myrrh, they'll say myrrh is my putrefaction. So myrrh is used in the funeral rites to kind of bring the bones and the skin and things back together after the funerary rites been done, so that like the spirit is intact in the other world. But there's like this whole body of work around the putrefaction and Osiris and his representation of it. And what's interesting is you'll often see him depicted with a green face. And of course, we're putting green oil on his face, and he is green. And it's like the phases of the putrefaction as they, as the what I'm trying to say, rigor mortis sets in, kind of goes through a green mottly phase, and they think that's probably exactly what he represents. But of course, he also represents rebirth. He's so he's not regeneration, he's resurrection. But of course, we're thinking about the cycle of coming back, and that's spring as well.
Yeah. So I originally was thinking of, I associated Galbanum with being very Pluto. But then I kind of, over the last couple of days or so, kept on getting this strong message about Mercury or Hermes. And yellow flowers, the Greeks and Romans associated all those plants with Mercury and Hermes. I'm like, well, hold on, Mercury is all to do with communication and the intellect and all that type of thing. And then it just kind of, the light bulb went off, and I'm like, but one of Mercury's other roles was the psychopomp. He was the guide that would carry the dead down into Pluto, down into the underworld. He would also act as a messenger between, if anyone was interested in connecting with their ancestors or mediumship, Mercury would help that communication in that form as well. And the transition of all of us between all the different realms as well. So I was like, oh, so, with this connection to the underworld and this ability to go between realms, and also this regeneration or this resurrection, as you've talked about, there seems to be Galbanum sits really nicely in that kind of place, whether we're looking in Egyptian mythology or Greek and Roman mythology.
And as I say, the earliest mention that we have of it is in the Exodus. So that's about 3,500 years ago. It's about 1400 BC. But there's been archaeological finds in ancient tombs, I think to 18th dynasty. So that would be around about 1900 BC. So very, very ancient. And the fact that we see it in a tomb says to us, well, that's got to have something to do with death. But where we find it in the Exodus is in the recipe for the holy incense, the ketoret. And the whole purpose of the ketoret was to create a sacred space for the Hebrews to be able to communicate with their God, or I should say with God rather than their God, because they only recognize one God. But think about how it purified the space, but it made it absolutely pure for an interaction between a deity and a human. You're quite right in what you say about Hermes. Hermes is actually the only mythological creature or deity or demigod, he is a god, isn't he, that can go up to the upper realms and down to the lower realms and come back. And so we have again this access to a deity, the purified space where we can speak clearly to a deity. And it plays a part in what's called the roses and stars. So roses and stars are the kind of lost energy systems that the Melissa use, the Melissa priestesses. So they're kind of like chakras, but not completely the same. Whereas the chakra system, or the main chakra system, has 7 energy centers, although there are many, many more. The roses and stars work on 8, which have correlations with many different things, but particularly the octave. And they work through what's called the nectars, the fluids of the body. So if you think about what glands do, then that makes a great deal of sense. Well, galbanum is to do with we still call it the crown chakra, or the door, we call it. And so again, there's this opening into the spiritual realm and this connection to the wider space. But it was really important to me, after I had the event with the Melissa work and the big initiation, and I was really quite ill from it, and I was very close to running away. And I'd recently done a tremendous lecture with Kathy Skipper and Florian Berkmeyer, and Florian had talked about, from a shamanic point of view, galbanum is very good for keeping your feet to the fire and saying, don't run, you're supposed to be doing this, this is your purpose. And you'll see a lot of writing about galbanum connects you to your purpose. Keep your feet to the fire, don't run. And so I used Melissa, Rose and galbanum together, and make no mistake, it was really difficult to keep on doing the work, but it did keep my feet to my fire. And obviously we are out the other side, ready to publish a book now, and I think that probably galbanum was really key in being able to achieve that.
I think it almost feels to me like it, when we talk about the resin oils, most of the other resin oils, myrrh, frankincense, all the ones that we've kind of Peru balsam that we explored a few weeks ago, they do all have these deep kind of seriousness to them, and it's almost as though galbanum, to me, feel I'm glad you're still here, because when you called Mercury a demigod, I was waiting for the lightning to come through the window and take you out.
Yeah, who do you think you are?
Yeah, but there's a heaviness and or a heaviness and a seriousness of the other resin oils, and galbanum does almost have. It feels like the gateway essential oil to the deep worlds of the resins and the secrets of the resins that Mercury would almost take us to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. And I always remember talking to Valerie Warwood about her work with aroma genera, and she was talking, so aroma genera has lots of aspects, but particularly she was talking about ancestral memory and how that gets passed through. And she was saying to me that the majority of the work that she does with ancestral memory is with these root oils and resins, these deep ones that seem to go deep into the psyche.
Yeah, I think this would be a great one for people that wanted to go a little bit deeper as well. And where I've found it can be really nice from an emotional healing aspect is really great for people. One, where there's an imbalance of blame, where sometimes people either will always want to blame other people and not accept responsibility, or will always take too much responsibility and take all the blame on themselves. It can really help in leveling out that. But another thing I find it really helpful for is for helping us to, in our book, we talk about the gift of it is unearthing. And I think it's for anyone who's willing to kind of take a bit of a deeper look at what's happening in life. So whether it be, okay, who's responsible for something unfurling, but also this need that many of us have to project, to make it look like everything's going okay, or that have issues feeling that, I don't want to be wrong. They don't like being wrong about anything, or that they always need to present a false kind of reality where everything is perfect all the time. And this can be a really great oil for helping us to go, well, we all make mistakes. We all have bad days. That's part of the journey of going into, the darkness of life and having those tough times and facing those tough times and learning from those tough times, rather than burying them and pretending that everything's okay, I'm always right, everything's hunky-dory and rosy. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And if you, I originally did the work back in Galbanum. Well, Dex was still a babe in arms. I was getting him out of his cot, so he'd have been around 2009. And the internet was still quite infant as well. And the few references I could find about Galbanum, there was this continual reference to St. James. And I was like, where's the evidence? Where's the primary source? And I've never found the primary source. But what I was interested to find out, well, who is St. James, as in the James the disciple? And he is referred to, maybe, can't remember which book, maybe Mark, but that might be wrong. But Jesus tells him off for being ambitious and not doing things for the sake of charity, for doing things for himself. And this idea of, and what struck me when I found that was very similar to what you've described, how people cover their arses, you know, at work and stuff like that. And who don't, you know, they'll step on people for the sake of stepping on people, and they're not very charitable about, you know, very compassionate about things that are going on. The problem that you've got is if somebody's that sort of disconnected from, and I always say a good spiritual path, but there is my shadow speaking, if ever there was some, that I'm like reflecting on them, but they're not going to want the oils on them. And but so it kind of maybe could diffuse it, but again, you've got the human rights aspect of how dare you do that in my space without me knowing what you're doing. But it is interesting to watch, you know, if perhaps somebody is like in bed with all these wounds and these bed sores, and they've been ordering people around, and they're kind of not thinking about everybody else, all about them because it hurts. And why would you not be bitter? To see the difference. And what's interesting is, and I can't remember the rabbi's name. I think his name was Rabbi Rashi. But and he wrote the reason why he thought that the galbanum had been put into the Ketoret was because it was bitter, and because it was a reminder to the human not to be bitter and to be sweeter and more generous in one's nature.
Yeah, wow, I love that. That's really interesting. Another aspect we look at with this emotional healing and people wanting to do the serious work is when you have that feeling of being overlooked or being jealous because maybe a sibling, maybe a colleague, maybe someone else is getting all the attention, and you take that, oh, you know, because they're getting all the attention, that means that I'm not as special. But everyone needs their time to shine as well. So I guess, you know, Galbanum for me would be a really great one for anyone who feels that they always have to be the center of attention. They need to show that everything's going well. It takes us into that reality that, hey, sometimes you're not going to be the most desirable person. Sometimes it's not your day.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's a Mercury thing, though, isn't it? Being able to communicate that well, you know, of shut up with your ego and say nice things.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know, with the talking about, you know, that Galbanum is almost like this entryway into the underworld and the darkness and death and resurrection, that kind of thing. I think it can also guide us into our own darkness of the aspects where we want to portray that false happy reality and that we've got it all together, but to admit that, okay, maybe we're not the best for the job. Maybe our life isn't perfect. Maybe someone else is better off to take that role. All those types of things are kind of going, maybe I'm not that special. And that can sound a bit kind of dragging people down, but I think it's getting that balance between we need to believe in ourselves, but also realize that everyone else is special as well. And sometimes, you know, the rainbow has all different colors, and sometimes it's Violet's day and not Red's day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think also the nature of the scent is quite melancholy. It's, you know, for those days where, well, actually today it's absolutely horrible outside. It's dismal and grey and murky, kind of smells like that, you know. And those days where you think, well, I'm feeling a bit sorry for myself. It's good. It matches the mood and kind of moves you away from it. But it's not like, it's a bit like give somebody lemon in those situations. It's a bit like shining a torch in their eyes. It's a bit too much, you know.
Yeah.
But also the other thing is that it has we're talking about Pluto, and I absolutely agree that, you know, it's Plutonian, it's entry into the underworld. But when we're talking about Pluto, then we have to say, well, is there an element of sex involved in, because Pluto is all about sex and genitourinary. Iranian medicine says very good for the kidneys, very good for the urethra, very good for bladder problem, excuse me, but also used in Iranian medicine, in army medicine, for what they're called in the womb. Not thyroids, what they're called?
Fibroids?
Thank you. Yeah, not for your thyroid, it's for your fibroids.
And if your thyroid's down in your uterus, you've got a problem.
It
Yeah.
just went. And also used for to dispel the fetus after a miscarriage as well. So all of those say Pluto to me. All of those say the death kind of pathway, the womb and the tomb is a very Melissa phrase to say. So I agree entirely in your psychic journey that it took you on. I agree.
Yeah, really interesting. And I think one thing, I guess, to wrap up, I'd like to emphasize that although we're kind of talking about it, taking us into this reality check and the gloom and the doom, it's not a negative necessarily oil. It's about being willing to confront the darker or the honest truth of how life is, rather than pretend that it's all rainbows and lollipops.
Yes, to put that in like a more theological framework, you know, the journey of the priestess to high priestess is all through the shadow realm. It's all about know thyself, and being able to go deeper into those parts of yourself, and being able, yes, psychopomp, yes, escorting the dead, but also escorting those parts of you that have died. Funnily enough, that woke my dream then. So the bees did come to me last night, and that's just completely broke the dream, talking about how it is also a journey into the past in childhood, of those things that have left behind, perhaps the thorn, and as things have sealed over, but then we are using them as triggers later on. So it's very good for things like phobias. I remember writing a long time ago about how somebody had used it for claustrophobia, agoraphobia, and these kind of feeling locked in, but also the journey of how did this manifest? Where did this come from? And being able to face the memory that started it. I mean, it's not your everyday oil on a spiritual basis. It's deep psychological work, I think. Yeah,
but definitely a special one, and I can kind of see now why it is, you know, it's worth having in your collection.
Yeah, and especially if you are if you come from, if you are, I was going to say come from the background, but if you have a dispensation like me to want to wander into the invisible realms, then it's a good guardian to have, definitely.
Very much so, very much so. So that's a little bit about galbanum. Next week we're going to go we're going to go from an earthy kind of mysterious essential oil. We're going to kind of swing the pendulum the other way. We're going to dive into one of probably the nicest smelling essential oils, neroli, or orange blossom.
Yeah, definitely. And what I will say to people just before we leave galbanum, if we're going to talk about it in the masterclass, but what on earth we're going to talk about in the masterclass, who knows? And I would love to, given that I've given you so much information there, please write your questions, because I'm sure that interesting questions will come from this one. So I think perhaps we don't prepare anything for galbanum as such. We'll just go with the flow and see what comes up. But
I think we might give people a few different ideas for blending galbanum for different aromatics and that kind of thing.
Some recipes and stuff, definitely, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And neroli, lovely for anxiety and skincare and loads of other things. So I'm looking forward to that.
Very much so. Of course, we must promote our masterclass is on the 24th of August. So it's only 11 days or not too far away. So make sure you grab your ticket. Check down below in the comment section. We've got a discount code so you can get a little bit off, because we want to look after our listeners and our viewers. So remember, we've done it at a different time zone. This is going to be a lot more friendly if you're in Australia or Europe. North America, this is not so much a friendly time, but we're going to alternate the times every second month so that everyone can join us live. But even if you can't join us live, we're going to go deep and you're going to get the recording. So you want to make sure that you register anyway, you get the recording, and you've got lifetime access to that as well. And we give you a little handout so you get all that as well. So make sure you register for that. We're going to be diving into, what have we got? We're looking at neroli, we're looking at tea tree, we're looking at galbanum, and what was the other one we've explored this month? I've gone blank.
Not a clue. Now you asked that.
Oh, Palo Santo.
Palo Santo. So we are going to be quite in a bit of a spooky realm, really, aren't we?
Yeah, they're kind of a bit of a mysterious. Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. So yeah,
big mix. Yeah.
Exactly.
So obviously today I've talked a bit about Melissa stuff, about the roses and stars and things like that. And of course, many of you will now know that my book is imminent. So it actually comes out right at the end of September the 29th. And so that weekend I'm going to be having all sorts of celebrations. On the 30th, I'm having lots of friends here in Ludlow, and I'm experimenting a great deal with Greek wine at the moment to see what I like. But on the 29th, which is the Friday, which is the day that the book comes out, I'm having a party, which I'd love to invite you all to. In fact, I'm having two. So I'm having one in the afternoon and one in the evening, so that like Australian people can come and stuff. And I'll be doing a bit of a reading from the book and giving people the opportunity to ask some questions. So on my link tree, I have put links. Please do book on for it so that I've got an idea of how many people are coming. But I would love to celebrate because this is a massive, massive day for me. So 5 years work coming to a fruition, and I don't want to be sitting there just looking, going, where has it sold one? Has it sold one? Trying to have some distraction of having some fun with my friends. So please do book on.
So just to be clear, the 29th events, they're both obviously online.
They are online, yeah, on Zoom, yeah.
Yeah, so you won't be supplying Greek wine for that. You have to BYO Greek wine for the 29th parties.
Yes, and so actually, if you're thinking of bring your own, here's some tips. So first of all, mead is very good to have if we're going to do some kind of ceremonial work. Also, a beeswax candle. If you've got a beeswax candle, that will serve you well.
Ooh, I can't wait now. So there's lots of different exciting things. So our masterclass is the 24th of August. The launch parties are on the 29th of September. We'll also have a masterclass around that time as well. But that's enough to keep you busy. Liz, thanks for joining me for Galbanum. And I'm again, you know, sometimes we go off on different tangents on what we think about an oil. But when you mentioned Osiris, there was something inside me that went, oh, that's what came to me as well. So
that's like when you did Helicris, and when you started talking about Chiron, I was like, has he read my book and nicked my work? Rude. And then I was like, no, he hasn't read my book, and he's come up with exactly the same conclusion. It's very, very weird, isn't it?
It is. And to everyone who's watching this and thinks, oh, we might plan it, basically we jump on. Liz goes, how was your week? I go, oh, yeah, it was great. I go, how's your week? She's like, yeah, it was good. And we go, ready? Let's go. And off we go. So we have no prior discussion about the essential oil beforehand. So, yeah, that's the magic of, you know, how do two people in very different backgrounds in different parts of the world get the same thing? That's the magic of the universe, I guess.
It is indeed.
We'll see you next week for neroli. Until then, take care.
Have a lovely week.